The sun had barely risen over the rolling plains, painting the horizon in streaks of orange and gold when James McAllister, a rugged cowboy with the kind of hands that had worked leather, rope, and earth for decades, rode slowly into the small town of Dry Creek. His horse, a chestnut mare named Bella, plodded steadily along the dusty street, her hooves kicking up small clouds that shimmered in the early light. James had been waiting for months for this moment, the arrival of his mail order bride, a woman whose letters had spoken of kindness, gentleness, and dreams of a peaceful life on the frontier. Each letter he had read countless times, savoring the promise of a quiet, loving home. He had imagined her face, her soft hands, the sound of her laughter, echoing through the cabin he had built with calloused fingers and tireless days. But that morning something felt off, a flicker in the wind, a subtle unease that made his hand hover near the gun at his hip. He dismounted, tying Bella to the hitching post outside the general store, and his eyes scanned the dirt road leading from the train station. There, amidst a cloud of dust and chatter, was a woman, but she was not the gentle, sweet-eyed bride he had pictured. She walked with the confidence of someone who owned the world, her boots kicking up dirt as she approached, a wide-brimmed hat tilted low over eyes that sparkled with defiance. In her hand was not a basket or a bonnet, but a gleaming revolver strapped to her hip, and a scar stretched across her cheek like a story of battles fought and survived. The townsfolk whispered as she passed. This was no ordinary woman, no timid bride. This was an outlaw, a woman who had made a name for herself in every county from here to the border, and she was walking straight toward James McAllister. James froze for a moment, disbelief etched on his rugged face. You're not her," he finally said, his voice a mix of surprise and irritation. The woman tilted her head, a smirk playing on her lips. "Names don't matter much out here, cowboy, but I reckon I can fill her shoes. For a price." The town seemed to hold its breath. James's mind raced, thinking of all the letters, the plans, the vision of a quiet life he had nurtured. And yet in that instant he realized that the life he had imagined was gone, replaced by the thrilling, unpredictable, dangerous presence of this woman who had just crashed into his orderly world. Over the next few hours, James tried to make sense of the chaos. He learned her name was Cassidy, and she spoke of train robberies, hideouts, and narrow escapes with a sort of pride and grit that left him simultaneously furious and intrigued. She wasn't the woman he had expected. She was wild, untamed, and impossibly bold. And yet, beneath the layers of toughness, there were glimpses of vulnerability, a woman who had fought her way through life's cruelty, and now strangely was in his world. As days passed, James tried to navigate this new reality. He taught her small things about ranch life, how to rope a calf, mend a fence, and cook a meal over a crackling fire. She taught him things he had never imagined, how to read people, how to anticipate danger, and more importantly, how to embrace the unpredictability of life. Each night, as they sat by the fireplace, Cassidy would tell stories of her adventures and misadventures, painting vivid pictures of narrow escapes and daring feats. And James, who had waited patiently for a quiet life, began to realize that perhaps he had been waiting for the wrong kind of woman. Tensions inevitably flared. One evening, a gang of local outlaws who had heard of Cassidy's arrival threatened the town. Guns were drawn, tempers ignited, and James found himself side by side with Cassidy, defending the only home he had ever known. She was fearless, almost reckless, moving with a precision and confidence that left James awestruck. And in those moments, as bullets whizzed past and dust filled the air, he understood the truth he had been denying. Cassidy wasn't a replacement for the bride he had ordered. She was something far greater, far more real, and far more alive than he had ever imagined. By the time the dust settled, the town realized that the cowboy and the outlaw woman were now an unbreakable pair. People who had doubted, who had whispered behind their backs, now watched in awe as James and Cassidy walked side by side, the promise of a new, wild, and unpredictable life stretching before them. The letters he had cherished became a memory, and the woman he had waited for was replaced by someone who defied expectation and demanded his respect, loyalty, and slowly his heart. And as night fell over Dry Creek, James lit a lantern outside his cabin. Cassidy, standing nearby with her revolver glinting faintly in the moonlight, smiled, a smile that held secrets, challenges, and perhaps, just perhaps, love. "You were expecting a bride?" she said softly, her voice carrying a teasing edge. "But you got me. Hope you're ready, cowboy." Life just got a whole lot more interesting, James chuckled, tipping his hat to the sky.
Cassidy.
I reckon I've never been more ready. As the wind whispered through the prairie grass and the stars blinked high above, it was clear that this was just the beginning of a story that would be told for years, a story of love that arrived not as expected, but as fiercely, boldly, and dangerously as life itself. And for those watching, waiting, and hoping for adventure, it was a tale that would remind them to never settle for the ordinary, to embrace the unexpected, and above all to subscribe, because the wild ride of James McAllister and Cassidy was only just beginning. Morning broke harsh and unforgiving over the plains, the kind of dawn that didn't ask permission before exposing truths people preferred to keep buried. James McAllister stood outside his cabin, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the woman, sharpening a knife on the wooden steps like she belonged there. Cassidy didn't look up when the blade sang against the stone. She moved with practiced calm, every motion screaming danger wrapped in confidence. This was not how James had imagined waking beside his future wife, not a woman with scars, weapons, and a past that followed her like a loaded gun. Yet here she was, breathing the same cold air, drinking the same silence, existing in his world as if fate had shoved her into it with brutal intention. James tried to convince himself this was temporary, that she would leave once whatever trouble she carried caught up with her, but deep down, something told him life had already crossed a line it couldn't uncross. Cassidy finally looked up, eyes sharp, reading him the way men like him read the land. "You don't trust me," she said flatly. James exhaled slowly. "Trust ain't the word." I ordered peace. "I got chaos." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Chaos keeps you alive, cowboy. Peace gets you buried." Those words lingered long after she stood and slung her gun belt over her hips. James followed her into the cabin, watching how she scanned corners, windows, door frames. This woman wasn't just dangerous, she was hunted. Over breakfast, she spoke little, but her silence was louder than conversation. When James finally asked why she took the bride's place, her fork paused midair. "Because if I didn't," she said quietly, "I'd be dead." That was all she offered. No tears, no apology, just truth stripped raw. By noon, trouble arrived on horseback. Dust rose on the horizon. 3 riders, slow and deliberate. James recognized that kind of ride. Predators announcing themselves. Cassidy stiffened instantly, hand drifting near her revolver. "They found me faster than I thought," she muttered. James didn't ask who they were. He didn't need to. When men rode like that, answers came with bullets. He grabbed his rifle, heart pounding, not with fear, but with a strange sense of inevitability. This was his land, his home, and somehow this outlaw woman was now standing inside its borders. The riders stopped just short of the fence. Their leader grinned, teeth yellow, eyes cruel. "Cassidy Black," he called. "You really thought you could disappear playing house with a cowboy?" James stepped forward before she could. "You're trespassing." The man laughed. "This don't concern you, farmer." Cassidy's voice cut through the air like steel. It concerns him now. The first shot cracked the silence. What followed was chaos. Gunfire, shouting, horses screaming. James moved on instinct, firing from behind cover as Cassidy advanced with terrifying precision. She wasn't reckless. She was calculated. Every bullet had purpose. When the smoke cleared, 2 riders lay dead. The third fled, terror in his eyes. James stood there, chest heaving, staring at the woman who had just defended his life with the same fierceness she protected her own. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I did," she replied. "They won't stop now." That night, James couldn't sleep. Neither could Cassidy. The truth settled heavy between them. Her enemies would keep coming. And by letting her stay, James had declared war on men who lived by blood. Yet when he looked at her sitting by the fire, shadows dancing across her face, he realized something unsettling. He didn't regret it. For the first time in years, his life felt dangerous and alive. Cassidy finally spoke, voice low. I wasn't supposed to survive past 16. Every man I trusted either died or sold me out. I learned quick, love is weakness. James looked at her, really looked. Maybe, he said, or maybe love's just the wrong word for trust. She laughed softly, bitter but honest. You're a fool, cowboy. Maybe, he said, but I ain't sending you away. Outside, the wind howled, carrying danger with it. Inside, two broken souls sat inches apart, neither willing to admit what was already forming, an alliance stronger than fear. This wasn't a love story built on letters and dreams. This was survival. And sometimes survival was the deepest bond of all. If you're still listening to this story right now, you already feel it, that pull, that tension, that need to know what happens next. Stories like this don't slow down. They explode. So make sure you subscribe and stay with us, because James and Cassidy's journey is only getting darker, deadlier, and far more unforgettable from here. The past was coming. Blood would be spilled. And the cowboy who waited for a bride was about to become something far more dangerous than he ever imagined.